you're starting your day with us. We're really grateful today. Thank you for being here. We know that there's probably more people coming, so we'll watch for people entering the room. Let's move into talking about what we're going to do today. Just a couple of tips for those of you who may not have been with us in Zoom before. We will be entirely on mute, all of you, except for our speakers and occasionally Yudit, Carrie, and I from the new team, helping everyone with questions and things that they want to bring up. We are asking you to stay muted the entire time, please, and if you double check that you are, but we would love to see your face. So if you can turn on your video, it would be wonderful. It's great to see the smiles and see who's in the room with us. And if you want to make it easy for yourself as well, speaker view in Zoom is really helpful. It'll isolate who's currently talking. Here's our agenda for the morning. We'll go through a number of sort of housekeeping things, but most of the time we want to spend with our speakers. And we have some really great information for you today about putting people first, dealing with sort of HR issues and your team. So this morning we are honored and really grateful to have the COAC team, Alondra Bolger, Kyla Carlson, maybe Charnay will be on this morning, I'm not sure. And so on the new team, of course, Yudit Mesfin Johnson, whose brainchild this whole series is, and my colleague, Carrie Hemmerman. So we're grateful to be able to help you and reach out to us via the chat if you need something. Most of you know a little bit about news, so I'm not going to belabor this slide in favor of our speakers. In honor of our norms, we want to again ask your grace for us as we negotiate in this virtual environment. We had some challenges the first time around, those of you who were with us, but this time we hope we've got it worked out. So we will start and end on time. Last time we went a little bit over, so it looks like if we're having some good conversation, we'll check in with you and see if anybody wants to stay in for a minute. It's certainly fine if your pets come and cuddle with you. On a call I was on yesterday, I actually had a wonderful cat going back and forth across the screen. That is not an issue. Please don't worry about it. We will ask you to really listen. There's some wonderful depth that comes out of this conversation, and we're hoping that you'll use the chat feature to give your thoughts and feelings as we go through our discussion today. Why we're here is because we're hoping that will help to increase some of our connectedness across the nonprofit sector. We really want to offer you some camaraderie, but some wisdom and actionable things so that it'll help your day. And as leaders in the nonprofit community, we really want you to be lifted up so that you can lift up your people as well. So today's topic is putting people first. We're going to talk about some of the issues of dealing with our HR issues and our staff and what everyone might be going through. Yudit, do you want to introduce our panelists?
Yes, and good morning, everyone. So glad you would get up and join us early on a Wednesday morning. Really pleased to bring before you today Karen Andrews, who's founder of the Andrews Group, and I count Karen as a friend and personal confidant. She's been with me on my leadership journey for probably the last 5 years or so now, and has become a trusted confidant on all matters HR. Lila Asante Appiah is founder and president of Purposeful Pursuits, a nonprofit enterprise. She's also the chair of News Board, and she's a new chair as I am a new CEO, and we are, I think, preparing to rock out news leadership in the coming years. So please join me, if you will, in welcoming these two phenoms in nonprofit leadership and management. Woo woo.
All right, we don't know what happened there. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always thrilled to support new in our nonprofit sector. So I've been in the nonprofit sector for quite some time, and it's always a joy to kind of partner with our leaders across Southeastern Michigan to help to inform and bring some new information as we all are dealing with some strange things right now. So let me start out by just opening up before I get to this slide. You know, in spite of the many ways in which this pandemic is impacting the lives of each and every one of us, from health, community, social connections, et cetera, it also gives those who are leading others an opportunity and time to reflect. Let's face it, during this weird and difficult time of crisis, all leaders are being challenged to make some very tough decisions. COVID-19 has created a moment of truth for every organizational leader. What makes this even more difficult is that we aren't necessarily able to firmly see the line of sight relative to when life will get back to some degree of normalcy. It is critical now more than ever that leaders demonstrate resilience, compassion, empathy, strong communication, both listening and responding, trust and vulnerability. Before tackling what and how you are going to respond as plans are being made to reopen offices, I really encourage leaders to take time to think about what I call a three-legged stool: leadership, culture, and shared values. So let's talk about leading in light of COVID. First, identify who you want to be as a leader. You know, take a step back, be aware of your core values in your style of leadership, whether it is a transformational leader or a directive, or you're a servant leader or participative, and how it sets the tone for your organization. There are superpowers in those proverbial Achilles heels associated with every leadership style. The couple of questions that I like to reflect on are, you know, who do I want to be as a leader, first and foremost? How does my team experience me? Knowing that self-awareness is really critical. You'll never be able to kind of lead from your truest self, which is so important right now, until you know you. Secondly, find your balance in identifying how you respond. It requires really a delicate balance between what's best for the organization as well as what's best for the employee. Many employees we know are experiencing a great deal of anxiety. Our human connections have always been important, but this pandemic has highlighted the absolute need to focus on people first. Leaders need to keep in mind that employees will always remember how they are made to feel. Oftentimes, it's worthwhile to reflect on whether your intent and your impact are aligned, and be cognizant of how these stressful times are affecting different people differently. And lastly, your leadership brand, aligning and empowering your leadership team. You know, it doesn't just stop with you. I think leadership teams have to have agreed upon behaviors that they want to employ. And as a leadership team, it's important to have an honest discussion to determine what you want to be known for as a team. Can you advance the slide, please? Thank you. So the next leg in the stool is culture. And I really see this as challenging as it is an opportunity, you know, to begin to reshape, to redefine, to strengthen, obviously reassess your culture. Culture is, as we know, your organization's internal compass, informing actions to take in times of crisis. Your culture will be put to the test with COVID-19. It is guided by your organization's purpose and values, and is essentially behaviors in action. In particular, how you organize and respond during the crisis, how you lead, how you manage talent, how you interact with others as well. Before making a decision, stop to consider whether you're contemplating actions that are inconsistent with your purpose and values. So it's kind of like your guideposts. Culture evolves, so ensure your culture is staying relevant. Don't stay where you are, challenge yourself. COVID has touched every individual we know in some way, shape, or form, and really requires that we act differently. What's most important is to create a sense of belonging, community, and oneness, while understanding people as the unique individuals that they are when you are administering policies even-handedly and trying to do that. I know that can be challenging. When reflecting on your culture, consider whether your culture creates an inclusive team environment, showing concern for success and well-being, or what's the key challenge for your leadership team to create the culture you are seeking? As well, take time to identify the degree to which your culture is reinforced by putting your values into action. And lastly, the influencers. We know there's a number of external influencers that impact culture, like technology or demographic changes or shifts. They often typically affect organizations, but this pandemic is having a downstream impact on many organizational policies. Case in point, we know COVID is forcing organizations to create and adapt to flexible work arrangements that will certainly become the standard for many businesses and agencies. Can we move forward to values? Thank you. So lastly, that third leg of the stool is your shared values. And we're talking about organizational values because they reflect how your team shows up and operates within the world. They convey your approach to serving customers, stakeholders, and most importantly, how team members treat each other. Leverage your values to guide decisions related to how you administer HR practices, in particular, your employee relations policies, like those that impact employee wellness, self-care, and the team members' ability to take care of their family members, like your bereavement, your PTO policy, your sick pay. And lastly, apply your values as you rethink what support your teams will need to perform well in a healthy and safe environment. In light of changes that need to be made relative to how the work gets done, it will surely look different. As leaders, we must apply our shared values to how we manage remote teams and approaches used to coach and develop staff in new ways. As an example, I was working with a leader who stepped back and took a pause to consider what's best for a team member who has an underlying health condition and determined that the employee can effectively work from home or different hours that will minimize his exposure to COVID and to others. So those are, one example of tough decisions that must be made, or someone who is fearful of coming back to work. How do we manage those types of situations? And listening to the employee, identifying what their fears are, and determining whether or not we can make some accommodations or have them rely on your PTO policy. So focusing on leadership, culture, and shared values, and ensuring that there is alignment between all three will enable you to make the right decisions during this crisis. Last but not least, just remember to reflect on your leadership style, talk about your purpose and values, and be deliberate about communicating your values in a meaningful way as often as necessary, and when your team members need to hear them most, and act in a purposeful way in bringing your culture to life for your employees, your stakeholders, and those you serve. Let's go ahead and turn over to questions.
Everyone, if you have some thoughts, questions on what Lila shared, and maybe even some of your own concerns that you'd like to bring forward, we invite you to type into the chat box. Carrie Yodit and I will do our best to share your questions and comments. Yodit and Carrie, if you want to make any comments about what Lila has shared as well. So I'm seeing a question. Carrie, thank you for posting it. How do you focus on your staff and your organizational values and culture?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carrie. I think it's starting with your values first, because if you have shared values within your organization, they can guide your thinking around and point you back to what you want to focus on and what's important to ensure that your values are living values. That's kind of how you make them living, is because you're utilizing them in your decision making and putting that up against the needs of the employee as well as the organization. It truly is a delicate balance between the two, but your values really can serve as that true guidepost. If my value is to be honest, if you will, and within the organization, of course, there's always a balance between that, right? Based on what you can share, but it does provide you some way of checking yourself around how you want to respond to an employee and what their needs are in relation to what's best for the organization.
Lila, another person asked, can you give an example of reinforcing and shared values without it sounding like a broken record?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've worked with clients on and organizations I've worked on is making it a little bit fun. You know, after you've rolled out your values, everybody's kind of had an opportunity to weigh in and had agreed upon values. It's really about keeping them alive. And the way I think that's best to do that is to have activities that maybe you do every month, every quarter, select a value, if you will, that you can highlight in a fun way. Always asking employees how they feel they are, how they've seen those values in action, create what we call maybe a shout out, if you will, where people can honor those who they're seeing embody their values so they can feel like they're being rewarded for that, which will reinforce that behavior. So there's a couple things that organizations can do to keep it alive and make it very organic and authentic.
Someone else asked the question, what tools have people used? And I really would like to encourage others in the thread. What tools have people used to maintain connection to staff? I'll offer that beginning about 8 weeks ago, I started a 15-minute morning gathering with our staff as a way for us to stay connected. And we used that time, one, with the prompt to everyone. That's usually something fun, but sometimes it's a way to get a gauge for how they're feeling or what's happening in their world. And then we move into sort of what was a victory from the past day, what's a goal for the current day, and what are stuck points they have. So that's just an example to that person's request. Lila, would you want to share? And then I guess one other thing related is we have what we call mission, vision, values moments on most of our agendas. And so we ask staff to share with us where they've seen our values in action, either our values or our mission. So that's another tool. Lila, can you think of other tools people have used to maintain connection to staff? And I do want to invite also Karen into this conversation if she has something to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree with your thoughts, Jodita, about how to keep it alive, how to keep connections going. I think it's important too that we understand what connection means to different folks in our team, right? Because everybody has a different definition of what connection is. They have a different need as well and how they want to stay connected. I think it is important for leaders to be thoughtful about how that looks and, you know, meeting the collective need to make sure the organization is in touch with each other, but also being mindful of the individual needs of each person on the team and ensuring your leadership team members or management team members also are embodying that maybe Susie prefers a phone call versus a full webinar, although folks should always participate if it's a full team, but just being mindful of what the needs are uniquely for each individual, which I know can be a lot to kind of put together and think about. But I think it's important that as we're trying to bring people together, honor our values and mission, again, you know, share how things are working for people and where they've seen it embodied, that we also look at what the needs are for each individual and try to honor those needs as well.
To that point, Lila, I'll bring up a question that was offered. How do you prompt a team of introverts to communicate their needs, concerns, and dreams about the future over screens?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That kind of speaks to what I was saying about the individual needs. You know, some folks who are more of an internal processor, they like to have time to think important issues through. They are going to have a different way of wanting to share information. And it might not happen in the immediate time frame in which you want it to be. I think that you have to, first of all, give people advance notice of what you are seeking to know about them or what their needs are, understanding that they may not tell you in the moment, right? Give them the time they need to step back, take a day, take 2 days, whatever that looks like for them, so they can come back and share with you and understand as well, even in the moment when you ask a question, if someone or a group doesn't answer, that it's okay, right? Don't take it personally that they're not engaged or they have no interest, et cetera. It's that they probably need time. So maybe you have another follow-up call or you follow up with people individually who you know can be more on the quiet side and need to have that internal time to process.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you to everyone too that is putting in ideas about what they're doing in their with their colleagues from work. I'm seeing games, checking in around fun stuff, doing yoga, non-work activities that prompt questions of each other. So there's that aspect of culture, which is the organization, you know, interacting with each other and just being individuals, right?
Yeah.
And there's the work of it. So yeah, sounds really good. There's some great stuff going on in the chat box. Let's move on. We'll keep the chat going. Thank you, Lila. Really great. And stay tuned and watch the chat box because there might be some questions coming at you, but we'll call on you again too. But let's move to Karen. One of the things I'll encourage in the chat box too, as you all on this call are CEOs, executive directors, et cetera, we want to talk also about that aspect of who do you want to be as a leader and keep things moving forward. So I'll invite you to comment about that in the chat box as well. Some of that will touch on what Lila's addressed and some of it will touch on what Karen is about to address. So Karen, go ahead and take it on, please.
Apologies, folks. I needed to unmute myself. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to chat with all of you about what I think is a critically important topic during this time, which is how do we take care of our most valuable resources, our team, the people that really allow us to advance our mission every day. And it is something that is a task where our work is never done. You know, we're always having to make sure that people are engaged and thoughtful and that we're thoughtful in response to their needs. And what I'm seeing, and I don't know if any of you are experiencing this, it'd be interesting to see your thoughts in the chat, is that it isn't a straight line in terms of taking care of people's individual needs during this pandemic. There can be some days that people are doing fine and they're solid, and 2 days later they hit a wall and they have a breakdown and they really need a different level of grace and support. And so I have been spending a lot of time with leadership teams that also have had kind of those ups and downs throughout, and encouraging them to not only give themselves grace through that time, but to also make sure that the messages that we're sending and the rallying cries we're creating to keep our teams engaged are positive, right? So that means that leaders need a different way to get that support and vent. And so one of the things that's helpful during this time to make sure we're engaging in leadership self-care is to just feel like we have some tools and tactics that we can deploy, especially on days when we're feeling a little bit weaker. It allows us to just know that, okay, if I go through these steps, then I get into that leadership mode and it will help me make sure that I'm doing the things for people I need to do. So I want to think about how we manage virtual teams, because if you're not in the same room, if you don't have those casual conversations with people that you normally have, if you don't have the opportunity to make that eye contact, to share all those nonverbal cues that indicate levels of deeper relationship and connection, we have to find ways to duplicate those with managing a virtual team. So on your slide, you see a pyramid, and it's really a different alteration of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you're familiar at all with Maslow's, it's a characterization of human needs developed by a behavioral psychologist in the 50s, Abraham Maslow. And at the bottom of the pyramid are those physiological needs, the things that we all need to survive and live, like air, water, sleep, shelter over our heads. And then as you go up the layers of the pyramid, there are things like relationships and belonging and love, and then self-esteem. And then the top level of the pyramid is self-actualization, right? That's when you're living your best life, when you're being all you can be. And those kinds of things can't happen without your basic needs being met. And when I was the board chair of a homeless shelter, that really became memorialized in my brain in a way that I hadn't ever experienced before throughout my studies. I saw that there were people that were residing in the shelter that really couldn't begin to think about, how do I take care of myself? How do I make sure I have my insulin? Or how do I make sure that I'm eating in a way that will allow my disease management to be well controlled? How do I begin to repair and rebuild the relationships with the family members in my life so they'll help me, until they knew they were safe and they had a roof over their head that night? Because if you have concerns about freezing to death or being attacked in your sleep, you can't really think about repairing relationships. You can't really think about living your best life. And so with that framework, now I want to invite you to consider a similar pyramid structure with how you're managing and how you're relating to your virtual teams. So at the base of that pyramid is their basic needs, right? Do they have the tools they need to be able to connect with you and the rest of the team? Do they have a space that's theirs where they can have quiet thought? I was watching, I can't remember which news show the other day, but they had an interview with Kelly Clarkson about what was happening with The Voice or something. And she was literally in the bathroom at her home. And they said, "What are you doing in your bathroom?" And she said, "This is the only place I can have privacy." And so are your employees having to hang out in their bathroom to participate in a staff meeting? Not that you have to, have a detailed understanding of their situation, but you do need to inquire with them. Do you have what you need? And if the only place they're going to be able to participate in a staff meeting is at a kitchen table, and there's spouses or partners, kids, puppies, whatever going on around it, then you need to do exactly what Judy did for us this morning and say, we have a lot of grace for that and understanding, and we welcome and accept you just exactly as you are. Because what I saw in the first several weeks of staying at home is that people were very concerned about their background, their environment, if there were noises. And the truth is we can't control those things, right? These are the things that we're living at home with. So you need to check in with people to make sure they understand that. And then you need to make sure that they have access to high-speed internet. And if they don't, what can we do to help them with that? A lot of organizations right now, AT&T, Comcast, are making plans available at very low cost or for free, especially for mission-based organizations. And so we need to check in with folks. Do you have a computer at home? Do we need to make arrangements for you to come into the office and take your desktop and transport it to home? I know many clients who had to do that. They had to figure out ways to make sure people had those basic needs met. So once you have that, then we get to the next level of the pyramid, which is, am I safe, right? Do I have some security? Do I have some peace of mind? And that's a really tough one, especially if all of you are dealing with and grappling with that question also. Like, what's going to happen if we can't begin to deliver services again? What's going to happen if we don't have revenue coming in? You may be thinking about that. And it's okay for you to think about that. It's okay for you to be grappling with that. But I want you to think about what messages you can share with your team that are honest and also supportive. And this is where some of those tactical HR tools also come into play, which is to say, listen, we probably have enough reserves or payroll protection funds to take care of everyone through June 30th. And then after that, we're still working on a plan, but I want you to know we're really aware and we're partnering with, the unemployment office to figure out what plans are available if we have to come to that. I know that's a tough message to share with employees, but if you're in that boat, it's much better that you give people the psychological stability of understanding what their reality is, because the unknown is terrifying. So we want to make sure that as much as we can, we're addressing job security, team stability, and that we're being honest with people, but we're also really knowledgeable about the ways in which people can be supported. And so this may be an area where you need to rely on your finance folks to help you do some modeling. Maybe you have someone with some HR background on your board, or you reach out to New or someone else to just say, what are those options to support my staff so that they have some sense of security? Because it isn't until you have that kind of workplace and security and stability basic level of needs met with your team that then you can get really back to how do we come together as a team and really enjoy the camaraderie and the shared values that we possess as a team. And one way to do that is to really, make sure that you're doing what you can to build trust during this time, right? That you are finding ways meaningfully to check in, that you are giving people a chance to tell you, I hit a wall today and I can't sit on one more Zoom call. I might die if I have to sit on one more Zoom call, right? Have any of you ever felt like, oh my goodness, if I have to be on one more Zoom call, it's exhausting, and recognizing that it takes more out of you than being with someone in person. So creating trust in a safe space. Once you've done that, now we can get to, okay, what can I expect of you in terms of work product? What's the individual achievement you're going to bring to the table? What tasks can I give you for the week? Then you can really get down to some of those specific tangibles that you're looking for from those team members that will allow them to feel that great sense of pride and contribution, that satisfaction that you get from checking things off your to-do list and knowing that you accomplished something great. And then once you're past that, and I've been listening to a lot of webcasts from people that have more of an entrepreneurial mindset, just because I'm really fascinated by people that are seeing this pandemic as an opportunity. And it seems in some way hard to view it as an opportunity, but there are silver linings in these stormy clouds that we're weathering under. And once you've addressed these other layers of the pyramid, you might be able to get to a place where you and your team are having conversations about what's new, what's different, what are alternative ways I can deliver my services, what are alternative ways we can be of service to the stakeholders that we care for. And maybe you're creating new and different ways of being together or delivering those services. And that's that top part of the pyramid. That's the equivalent of that self-actualization. So we don't get there, we don't get to innovation unless we're really taking care of those basic needs and those psychological needs. So I'm hoping that gives you some tactical tools that'll be helpful as you're trying to really care for your people. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. So just really the basic message as a tactical tool is please get on some kind of video conferencing platform and talk to your people. Because what employees are telling us during this time of crisis is almost all of them want a boss or a supervisor that will listen. And what we tend to do on Zoom platforms or any type of non-face-to-face meeting platform, even if it's just a phone call, is we tend to do a download of information. We tend to say, okay, so I got you on the call and here's what I need you to know. And we just download the facts and then we get off the call. It's much less personal. But as I saw in the chat, doing some touch base, asking questions, your roses and thorns, or playing games together, that is so, so, so critical, especially now. So to really take a few minutes, it isn't wasting time. Actually, it's giving you the leverage that you'll need to be able to produce what is necessary for your mission. So I love the roses and thorns, have everyone start with that. Or one technique that I've seen used is what's been a highlight for you since the last time we were together, and what's a question that you have right now. And so everyone has a highlight, even if it's just, I looked out the window and I see that all the robins are back, or I've figured out how to, dye my own roots, whatever it is. People have different highlights and they can share that. And then usually people have questions like, what does this mean? What does the new executive order mean? What are we doing about this? How are we going to clean our offices? And so you then begin to develop a catalog of those questions. And then that becomes your work as a team, is to just call those out as the issues that they are and to identify them, name them, and work together to solve them. So then those questions become less scary as well. So listening is really, really key. Not every time you get on a call do you have to really work on issues. There might be some times that you just have a social hour. I know some teams like to, have a cocktail during their social hour when they do Zoom, maybe Friday late afternoon. You don't have to do that. It could just be that everyone gets on board and highlights their week without talking about work. But make time to listen to people. Make time to understand, who are they worried about? What are they feeling themselves? What has been helpful for them in terms of propping themselves up, and what has been not so helpful? And then hopefully we can begin to share with each other tools that are working, right? So I want you to know, and Lila said this as well, I could not agree more, how you treat your employees during this time will set the tone for your working relationship with them when all of this is over. They will remember what you did to try to take care of them, both from an organizational stability standpoint, as well as just a psychological and personal safety standpoint. And so that's a lot of things, right? It's like creating space for them to be a caregiver. Maybe they're dealing with someone who is ill, or maybe they have children at home now that they're all of a sudden, their second full-time job is being a homeschool teacher, when none of us prepared for that. Like, I am here to tell you right now, I did not sign up for it, and I am a terrible homeschool teacher. And so despite that, it's my job, and I feel like I get 37 emails a day from the school telling me all the assignments that my kid has to do, and I want a little grace and space to acknowledge that as well. So we have to make sure that we're creating opportunities for balance. And that may mean that your core working hours look different. So maybe your office was open from 8 to 5, but now maybe you have working parents at home who have to homeschool. Maybe they have toddlers at home. And maybe now your employee is going to work 6 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 7 p.m. and that's all they can do. And that's okay. Like, really figuring out, I want to know what you can count on from me, and I need to know when you're going to be available as well. And if that changes, hey, just let me know. But just making sure that we're creating space for those kinds of conversations as everyone does their very best to work in these new conditions. And it has to be said that our standard bereavement leave policies are probably not going to get it done. This is a whole new world. And we might have some folks that have lost multiple people. I saw a friend's post recently. She had lost 3 of her aunts in a span of 1 week. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I don't even know how you begin to process that kind of loss. It certainly isn't with a standard 3-day bereavement leave, right? Like, just take your 3 days and then you're good, right? It doesn't work like that. And so now is a really good time to check in with people and say, what does that look like for you? And if you have an employee assistance program, it's also a great time to say, remember that's there for you. If you don't have an employee assistance program and you do offer health insurance, remind people of the mental health benefits that are available to them. And most mental health providers right now are offering virtual sessions for grief counseling so that people can really have access to the support they need during an incredibly trying time. So do what you can to just really encourage people to tell you what they need, because these are uncharted territories. And so that requires all of us to be extremely flexible. We need to be flexible with understanding what people can do. And we need to ask them also to be open to requesting that flexibility. And so that becomes much easier when we do have a clear plan. So if you could go to the next slide for me, please. Okay. I'm sorry, I thought the checklist was next, so I'm gonna morph in the moment. So what questions come to mind for next steps? Yeah, I mean, we do need to think about what is next. What's our rallying cry? What are we asking people to do? And it's important for us to as leaders, to have kind of a clear sense of what our future might be like, even if we have to change that 3 or 4 weeks from now, to give people a clear sense of what returning to work might look like, how we deliver services. But I'm going to stop talking for a second and see what questions there are.
Karen, I wanted to mention, we did, because it wasn't so legible, we took out the checklist, but would you?
Right, it was really small, yes.
Yeah, and we're going to share it with the resource document that we're going to share with everyone after the call. So do you mind talking to it as we start getting some things compiled in the chat box?
Yeah, so what you'll see in your reference guide, and Lila has added some wonderful resources as well. I think you're going to have a pretty robust reference guide after today. There's a simple checklist that just kind of talks about things that you need to think about before you might bring people back to a work setting, including what are your policies? Do you have to modify your policies? We talked about bereavement leave. We talked about flex time. But additionally, what are going to be your policies around social distancing, cleaning, screening individuals, and what are you going to do if someone just isn't comfortable, right? Let's say they have an underlying health condition, or they have a family member with an underlying health condition and they just don't feel safe. And so really thinking through all of those things and creating some standards or policies around how you will address that, I think will be really helpful in terms of allowing you to feel thoughtful and your employees to feel good about returning.
Excellent. Thank you for mentioning that. Everyone, again, I'll reference that you're going to be getting this checklist. There's a lot of really good resources that both Lila and Karen have shared with us. So we're compiling the resource list. If there are questions about that checklist, certainly we're going to also give you the information of how to reach out to Karen and Lila. We'll give you their email addresses and websites and all of that. But Rebecca in the chat is asking about if anyone has a strong bereavement policy. Can you share about that in the chat? And Lila and Karen, do you guys have any comments about bereavement policies or concepts that you can offer?
Yeah, I think traditional bereavement policies are not going to work in this situation. I think that, one of the trends that we're seeing as it relates to paid time off in general is a lot more flexibility. You're seeing some organizations offering unlimited or just a larger bank that people can use with a great deal of flexibility. And I would feel like that is the direction to move into, is to give people more flexibility around how they're using their paid time off as a larger bucket versus having different buckets for sick and bereavement and vacation and personal days. So what are your thoughts, Lila?
Yeah, it's a great advice, Karen. I agree with that as well. Keeping in mind that grief is being, somewhat not really delayed, but it kind of feels that way because people are working from home. And it was interesting, we were on a call with my staff and the organization I work at during the day, daytime organization. And, we heard people were sharing about, how COVID is impacting them. And there were people on the call, team members who said, oh yeah, my brother passed away yesterday. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that, first of all, why are you on the call? Why haven't you taken time off? What do you need? And are people feeling like they don't need to take the time off because, or that it would seem odd maybe, or socially unacceptable, if you will, in this weird time, because they're working from home anyway. And at the time there was the ordinance was that they couldn't really have many people at the funeral. So it was just, really, really odd time. And, being thoughtful about, to Karen's point, I agree, having more of a flexible PTO or time off that encompasses a number of different needs, if you will, where people could use them and not be so restrictive on what that looks like by category.
And certainly from the standpoint that, you know, there has been certainly this focus on bereavement policies address only some level of what we quote call nuclear family, which is more of a Eurocentric kind of concept. But, you know, broadly, our families are far broader than that. And there's the families of birth and the families of choice, right? So if our, you know, BFF has passed or her mom or dad has passed, you know, we have some, you know, certainly emotional tie to being in connection with them. And then there's the aspect of maybe sometime this fall, there will be a whole group of memorial services for people that died during this time when we can't be together. And we would hope at some point we could be together later. And, you know, how many different opportunities we have to check in with that extended family. So makes it.
Karen or Lila, there's a question, and I'm curious about this too, as we're thinking about increased flexibility around bereavement, around PTO. Can you talk to us about the balance between the legal requirements and our desire to be generous or more adaptive and flexible?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really any legal requirement to offer anything other than paid sick time in the state of Michigan. So having said that, this is where Lila's very thoughtful comments about what kind of leader do you want to be are the key driver. And so one thing I want to just say is that think about what is your intent here? How does it align with your values? And then please be consistent. That's really my only legal disclaimer, is that what you offer should be available to everyone consistently.
Yeah. That's
There's
that,
a couple other things that, oh, please.
I'm sorry, that last point is so important. I agree with that you want to be consistent. And it can be sometimes challenging because, you know, we all have different relationships with team members. We might know some of our team members better than other members, or just have connected with them in a different way. Even if you're a leader, that happens. How do you even-handedly apply whatever you put in place would be really important.
That's great. The other thing that I just want to name explicitly, because it's come up in our Centering Justice series, and I think Karen alluded to it, but while we are all experiencing a form of collective trauma, one of our fellows from our Leaders of Color program kind of talked about these the bifurcated timelines even, right? Social media is the place where many of us are going to gather since we can't gather in person. And in Black and Brown communities that have been disparately impacted by the disease, the community generally is grieving, right? And then we also have staff of color who, as Karen mentioned, may have had multiple losses or are connected socially to a number of people. I know friends of mine in Detroit have been hit really hard. And I find myself really challenged being online and hearing almost daily about someone who's lost someone. So I think when we overlay a commitment to equity, to inclusion, to belonging, that as leaders, it's important for us to acknowledge that the different communities that are represented in our staff and the different identities that are represented in our staff. I want to also uplift anti-Asian xenophobia, the ways in which folks who had been in the disability community had been really demanding work from home flexibility, not getting it, and suddenly that's an option, right? So right. I want to just acknowledge the necessity on our part as leaders to also attend to the ways in which folks who come from different identities might be experiencing this. So it sounded, Karen, like you were saying, we could absolutely as leaders update our bereavement policies to expand beyond that nuclear family, for example.
Yeah, I really encourage that. Also, you know, I think historically in HR policies, there would be different levels of bereavement. Like, you know, you got 3 or 5 days for your immediate family, and then you got 1 day for other family members. You know, that has always felt strange to me because, you know, sometimes that just doesn't make sense depending on the individual. And so I think now is a time for us to really think about what's our intention in terms of providing bereavement leave. And there's no requirement for you to write your policy a specific way, but just be consistent once you have it. And I think everything you just shared, your deed, is spot on. I think it's going to be different going forward. And now is a call for all of us as leaders to say, what's our intent around providing the space for people to heal and to come together, and to make it as flexible as possible, and to understand that not everyone's family looks the same, nor should it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the other thing that I'd love for y'all to speak to is, and maybe it's come up in the chat a lot, we're all reimagining work. I mean, whether it's my concern for staff who have families, if there's no summer camp, how do I, even if I reopen my business, am I expecting my staff who have children to try to figure out how to get to work? Can you just talk about, maybe one or the other of you, the unlimited PTO, the working the hours that best work for you? I just want to name that suddenly when you talk about that spaciousness, Karen, I'm questioning every system and process that we have in place, and wondering if you know, are you all also seeing that? Are others on the chat also seeing that? And what might, in terms of like taking us, I can't blow up our entire organization, right, all at once.
Right.
But what are some steps that I can take as a leader as I'm reimagining all of this?
You know, what's been interesting to observe for me over the last decade as a recruiter, if I'm putting my recruiter hat on, is an increasing demand from sought after applicants for flexibility in both their work location and their work hours and the amount of vacation they can have. And so that's been growing kind of organically. And I think after this, whenever we go back to whatever the new normal is, it's going to just explode even further. And so that doesn't mean that you have to blow up your business, but it is okay to say, these are our core working hours, you know, and for some companies, maybe that's 10 to 2, maybe it's 9 to 1. And then outside of that, how you get the work done is self-directed, and it's based on, you know, trust and accountability. And, you know, we need to see you in the office on these particular dates for these kinds of interactions that are necessary. But I think you're going to see more demand for flexibility around that, and you're going to have to find ways to structure accountability around that demand. And it's also going to require that leaders become much more emotionally intelligent than they are today, right? How many of you know a supervisor that their entire supervisory toolkit is whether your butt is in your seat on time? And so now I'm supervising you because I made sure you're at your desk on time. No, now the supervisory toolkit is going to be, am I able to build trust with you? Am I able to understand when you need real-time coaching? Am I able to push you beyond your comfort zone in a way that allows you to still feel safe and experience personal growth? And so it's going to be more taxing for leaders, which I think is a really good thing. And it's going to be also requisite for all of us to create kind of standards around what's essential for you to be here, what's core, and when can I really treat you as a professional and give you the self-accountability to drive your work in a way that fits your life.
I'd like to bring up, can I bring up something that was in the chat box? There is this interesting dynamic for CEOs and executive directors of managing daytime staff, employees, you know, work hours, all of that. But then there's also the board of directors and the issues that they bring forward, and whether or not the organization is moving forward on other aspects of work. Lila, Karen, do you want to speak to your sense of how that really awkward in between is negotiated?
Please.
Yeah, so let me just, I'm sorry, Judy, can I go back to respond to what?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Not a problem.
So one of the things too I want to add is as you're thinking about policies and how people work, et cetera, what's acceptable, what's not, those flexible, that total discussion around flexible work arrangements, taking in mind into consideration that, we have the flex work piece, like Karen was saying, flex time, where you have your core hours, et cetera, and people can come and go within a span of time, but they have to be there for the core hours. That's one option. Obviously, telecommuting, we obviously are all very familiar with that at this point, telework. Compressed work weeks could be maybe another option, maybe not. Job sharing could be something that folks can think about as well, and of course, part-time. So just thinking about there's many ways to look at flexible work arrangements that would allow you to build in some flexibility, because to Karen's point, and I agree, the market is going to look very different from a talent perspective. Unfortunately, people are out of work now, but people are going to have different needs, and we still have to be competitive, within any organization to get the talent that we need. So those flexible work arrangements are going to be even more important because of that. I think it also goes back to and touches on a little bit of, I think Karen, you said this as well, someone who thinks, okay, my employee's here now, so they're in their seat, and that's the only way I can manage their performance or understand what they're working on is if they're right in front of me doing that work. And that really speaks back to that culture piece that I was speaking about earlier, that, that leadership style of the leader and the collective style of the leadership team absolutely has an impact on the results of the organization. So if you are a directive team or authoritative type team, that command and control will lead to you'll feel that compliance take root within your organization, and that right and wrong will be the only way that people will work. So you got to kind of still, as you're looking at your flexible work arrangements, et cetera, go back, to the culture question around what culture am I trying to build, and what result am I getting in light of that, understanding that my leadership style and that of my team sets the tone, again, for the organization.
Well said.
So to that, did either of you want to address the issue of being in between board and staff? Is there anything with that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I saw Susan initiated a question in the chat about, how are you interfacing with your board? And I saw some other folks saying, I'm not interfacing with my board much, just my board chair. And, I think that one of the most important things right now as a board member is to be supportive and to have, some real-time connection. And that's challenging because a lot of times your board members are dealing with their own business crises. So I would say certainly be proactive, reach out to them with specific questions, find ways to engage them. They really need to take some of the load off of your executive leadership, because right now you're making such critical decisions that you need their wisdom and their support, and you need them to be aware of what you're doing. So, I would say a commitment to over communicate, to get them involved is important. And while that may seem challenging to have to really over communicate with them, we have to do something to get their attention right now. And they're in a swamp full of alligators, just like the rest of us right now. So really call them in. And hopefully you're calling in your whole board, because sometimes if you just hear from one or two voices on the board, it might not be a diverse enough perspective to really guide you in a way that's helpful.
Yeah, and I will add one last piece. I know we have to close out, but as it comes to the board, I think it's we have to, as the executive leaders of the organization, we have to challenge our board a bit in a way that so that they understand the values that you're trying to employ within the organization are being honored at the board level as well, so that there's not this weirdness, if you will, that you're charging forward, trying to honor your values and make decisions in light of your values along with your purpose, et cetera, and the board doesn't necessarily agree with that or see that as important, because then it will set up this dynamic that will be difficult to manage.
Thank you so much, Karen and Lila. We really appreciate what you've offered to us today. Thank you all for coming. Carrie has posted in the chat box our evaluation form that we'll invite all of you to fill out, please. And you will get a follow-up email. We'll also share the resource document that I mentioned earlier. Our next meeting is May 20th, again at 7:30. And we will be having Jocelyn Andrews Davis of Jade Strategies and Steve Frank of Evolution 360D, who will be talking about leading with resilience. We're hoping that that will be of interest to you. It's really been a really insightful conversation. I appreciate all of the information that our speakers have shared. Any further questions or comments, anything that we can help you with, if you want to send us email at info@new.org. We appreciate that info and feedback. We're also asking, we'd like to give our speakers a bit of a stipend because they're offering their time with us very early in the morning. So on your screen and in the handout packet that you were sent in advance is a URL for the donation page for New. We'll be tracking that to make sure that it goes to stipends for the speakers. So if you can help us with that. Again, thanks to our partners at COACT who were here in the room. I know I saw Landra and Charnay, I believe, maybe Kala as well. And thank you for the grace that you gave us all today, for technology, and our speakers for preparing so much in advance and having way more that they could have shared, but with a time limitation. So thank you everyone for being here. We're really grateful. Thank you, Lila. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And any of you that wish to leave, we can monitor the chat room and see if there's anything else that needs to come up, but we wanted to get out on time. We're a minute or two over, but honoring everybody's time. Thank you again for joining us. And if you didn't get the packet of info or the slide deck, please reach out as well via email. We can send that to you. These resource checklists or lists, I'm sorry, will be part of the resource packet, as well as the checklist that Karen referenced earlier. It just wasn't easily readable on the screen. So thank you, Karen. It's a really good list. I read through it, and we'll be including that as a graphic on the document. I'm not seeing anything in the chat box. So with that, I guess we'll say goodbye for now, and I'll stop the recording. Thank you all. Have a really blessed day.
Thank you, Judy. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
It was good.